as we venture into Tongvanyi, while I was researching Doctor, I came to find out that Doctor has a work called The Essential Tibetan Buddhism. Something like that.
Essential Tibetan Buddhism?
Yes, yes.
Right.
Doctor has translated a work like that. Now, my question is, because within the Tibetan Buddhist world or universe, there are things which are said to be secret, in a sense that the recipient of that knowledge would not comprehend it. But then there are people who can misuse or abuse that doctrine.
Right.
I had viewers who said that, oh, I am Buddha by nature, so thus I don't have to do this or I don't have to do that. So that misunderstanding could also be a problem. I would like to know Doctor's perspective on that, on what are the secret doctrines, and is there such a thing that that I am not worthy of that doctrine, or that doctrine is not meant for me or not meant for women? So if anything that Doctor could share on that.
Well, that's a good subject, and it's something new actually in the history of Buddhism. But then again, Buddhism was never always exactly the same, you know. It changed as the circumstances of the societies in which it served. If we understand that Buddhism's major role in the world has been as an educational institution, not so much as a temple. That the temple was for the people who, because in the old days in agricultural societies, not so many people were educated and literate, and they had to produce subsistence, livelihood, and work in the farm and so forth. So they weren't approaching to study. Do you know what I mean? India was the richest of all the ancient countries on Eurasia in the Buddha's time. So the cities were bigger, and there was a better agricultural surplus, and more people were educated actually than in other, like China or Europe. They were more backward, or in Persia even, they were more backward than India. That's why Buddhism came out of India. And so what was secret in those ancient societies, because people would misunderstand, became more and more well known, so that by the end of the Indian Buddhism, which was only destroyed by external invasion from outside, from around 500 of the Common Era to 1,000 or 1,100 of the Common Era, actually the Tantra, which is that esoteric stuff, was pretty well known actually, pretty widely known within the educated people, you know. And even then probably it was also abused and misunderstood to some extent. So there was a basic idea that it was like advanced study. But it isn't just that somebody's not worthy of it. It isn't just that there's something going on that is evil or weird and therefore other people will behave. It is just that it's like you don't try to do quantum physics without learning ABC or 1, 2, 3, you know, multiplication table in mathematics. You have to, it's advanced study type thing, you know. For example, if you, in the 20th century, at the very end of 19th and early 20th century, Sigmund Freud came up with the theory of the unconscious in Western psychology. He started what is called depth psychology. And when he started that, the European people were very freaked out. In a way, it connected with their Christian idea of the sinful nature of man. But in another way, nobody wanted to admit that they had these underlying instincts and drives. So he was kind of persecuted at first, Freud was. But then it became sort of known, you know. But on the other hand, even today, if you would go to some simple farming community in Arkansas or Kansas or somewhere in the United States, supposedly advanced industrial country, and you would start talking about Freud unconscious and how everybody wanted to do every horrible thing to everybody else, they would run you out of town and tell you to go find Jesus and forget. They would be upset. So in that sense, even psychoanalytic depth psychology is a little bit almost esoteric today. You know, it's for some advanced people who want to really work with their own mind. Or someone who's really sick, then they try to help them because they are frightened of what's in their own mind, and you have to try to reassure them and whatever. You know, psychotherapy, you know. So in that sense, the Tantra is the most advanced teaching Buddha gave. And from the point of view of us Tibetan and Bhutanese and Mahayana Buddhists, Buddha did teach, and Japanese Tantric Buddhists, Buddha did teach Tantra. It wasn't just made up later by other people, just like Buddha did teach Mahayana. In a way, in the time of Buddha, he even said, Mahayana is not going to be widespread right away. It'll be a little bit esoteric. the whole regular Mahayana, sutra system, as we might say, because people are not ready for the deep teaching of non-duality. They need dualistic Buddhism, where they become monks and they create Sangha, and they think that nirvana is outside the world and they're going to get out of life, no more birth, like it said. And we need a lot of monks and nuns to create a more peaceful atmosphere in the society at his time. And in about 400 years, Nagarjuna will come and he will rediscover the Mahayana Sutras, my Mahayana teachings, and they will spread them in the world. Buddha said that himself. We believe that, and I think that's true. Modern historians don't believe that because they think Buddha was just an ordinary person like them. They can't imagine that he would have such a good vision of the development of human society, like a sort of super sociologist, saying when it would be ready for whichever teaching, But I think those of us who see the Buddha as a super normal and super intelligent being, we think that that's very possible. So, the thing about how we all have Buddha nature only relates to the fact that we have the capability of becoming enlightened. It doesn't mean we are already enlightened. In another sense, of course, you can say when we become enlightened, then time has a different perception, experience for us, and we look back at ourselves and we realize we were already one with Buddha, all the Buddhas, even then. For example, to right this minute, all the Buddhas, they perceive you and me as indivisible from their body and mind. Like, they don't see us as different from themselves. But they realize that we see ourselves differently because of our ignorance, and therefore we in no way does it do us any good just to say, I'm a Buddha, I'm one with Buddha. It a little bit maybe makes people feel reassured. But on the other hand, if they say, I'm with Buddha, so now I'm going to do some horrible things, then they're going to be Buddha as some kind of horrible insect or in hell. The person in hell can say, I'm one with Buddha, but I'm not having a comfortable time of it, from my bad evolution, from my bad karma, But on the other hand, I consider the tantric teachings, which are not invented in Tibet or in Bhutan. They came from India, from the most sophisticated universities of the human mind that have ever been developed by human beings, in my opinion. Much more sophisticated than Western psychology, which is only a century or two old and is imprisoned by the logta of materialism. So they think it's just a brain, and all they want is more drugs and more electrical stimulations and neuroscience, and they don't think that you can learn the mind from within the mind. They don't think they can mobilize your mind to develop your mind. They don't agree with that. So they're imprisoned by that, And our psychology, the Buddhist psychology, is much better in that sense. So they take responsibility for how we use our mind, because that will influence the condition of our mind. And anyway, within that mind science, what I would call mind science, the tantric level of it is the most subtle and the most sophisticated. It's what enabled the Buddhists to understand the processes of death and rebirth and the between state, the pardo state, and even the processes of sleep and dream in a much more sophisticated way than anybody else has done. Although I think Hindu yogis and Taoist yogis in China, under interaction with Buddhists over hundreds of years, they also developed good understanding, I believe. And some Christian mystics and Sufi mystics also. But as a systematic psychology, I think the Buddhist one is pretty much unmatched. You never want to compare religion and say one is better than another, and we don't do that as a Buddhist. But you do compare sciences, and you say this is wrong, and or scientific results. You say this one is correct, this one is incorrect. You have to do that, like with mathematics. 2 and 2 is 4, it isn't 5.
Speaking about maths, yes, the doctor was just speaking about maths, and doctor also mentioned Nagarjuna. Yes. And shunyata and emptiness. We've had callers whenever we go live about some questions alluding towards emptiness. So today, if doctor would be so kind enough to speak to us about shunyata.